current gen consoles are underpowered? What? True Techno Gamer here, back at it. Sorry for the delay, guys. I know it's been a little bit since I've put out new videos, but I have a lot more content coming. I'll try to get it out when I can. Now, for my next video, probably next couple of videos, I'm calling them video game hot takes. There's some things that have just been on my mind. And the first hot take, I'm actually going to have to divide this one into two parts. I'm going to hit you guys with two different angles on this. So the first hot take is this narrative that the current generation consoles, specifically meaning the Sony PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X, are underpowered. I'm constantly hearing this narrative. I'm constantly seeing threads on various places, various forums and such, where people are talking about that and saying that repeatedly. And I'm gonna have to set the record straight, guys. I'm gonna hit you with facts. One thing you need to know about me is that I'm never going to come at you, if you know me personally or on this channel, if I'm presenting information, it's never going to be from a place of ignorance. That is one of my principles, one of my charters you can put on this channel. If I'm talking to you, you guys have seen this, home theater, gaming, whatever, I'm talking about it because I am qualified to do so, because I have experienced it, I have researched it, I am knowledgeable on it. That doesn't mean that everything I say is the Bible. You know, I have my opinions, I have my thoughts, but if I'm communicating that to you, it's because I have experience with it. Let's break down this narrative about how the consoles are underpowered, because I simply don't get it. This isn't about defending consoles blindly, like I said, or just for the sake of defending consoles. But this is about understanding the realities of the situation, right? Now, fundamentally, when people talk about the consoles being underpowered, what are they referencing, okay? Right? What I've observed and what I've heard is usually they're talking about in the context, of course, of what they feel is the state of the art, what is the highest end of what's available today, which of course will today be on PC. Once upon a time, that might have been arcades, right? For example, but nowadays it's the PC, right? And they compare it to now 4090 and, you know, a Ryzen 9 7950 XD CPU, right? Or something crazy like that. And they say, okay, compared to that, the consoles are weak, right? That's really not the way to think about that. That's not the way to compare it. That's not the reference to use, right? Consoles have a certain place in the gaming industry, in the gaming market space, okay? They're not PCs for a reason. And that's a whole nother video. We'll get into that, right? So understanding that they are fixed hardware, they are meant to be optimized for gaming. As fixed hardware, yes, they don't change. So over years, they will, get perceivably weaker, right? Because they're not, going to evolve as fast as what you will see on a PC. That is true. But you have to compare. The proper comparison would be to look at what consoles have actually delivered historically in the past. What new innovations, what new technology, and how effective were they in delivering that technology in the past? And that's what I'm gonna break down for you guys in these two parts. Quick PSA, folks. Before I get into this, I just need to say, please, please, please don't start flooding the comments with all of these console versus PC kind of talk and how PCs are so much superior to the consoles, because if you're doing that, you're really missing the point of this video. Of course, there exists PC hardware that you can buy and build that can be vastly superior to the consoles. We get that. So as I talk about the merits of consoles, if I talk about the value proposition that these consoles bring and all of the innovative technologies that they're bringing, I'm specifically talking about in the context of what consoles historically have brought compared to what consoles have bought in the past. I'm trying to give these consoles their flowers in that context, not against the PC. So I don't want to hear how 4090 is so much better and 60 frames per second is laughable because the PC crowd is playing at 400 FPS and 400 hertz and 8K this and like, no, that's not what this is for. So please do not bring that energy to this video. So for this one, for part one, let's just lay out the facts and lay out some numbers and lay out some general points I want to make here, okay? So first and foremost of why I don't think, and I don't understand the narrative that the consoles are underpowered. The first point I want to make is hardware defects, right? These consoles, 3 years in, there's been no stories about defective PS5s or Xbox Series anything, right? There have been no red ring of death. Of course, there's no yellow lights. There's no need to flip your console over to get the CD laser to read it. There's no need to blow in your console, right, to get the dust out so that it can work properly, right, and whatever. There's no reports of just systems just failing, right? I mean, none of that. These have actually been probably the most bulletproof consoles, both of them, the Xbox Series and PS5, that we've ever seen. Right? I'll give you some examples. Yes, I dated myself, but those things happen, and it's kind of expected, right, that you would see, a pretty decent failure rate in console generation. Not so here. These are foolproof, bulletproof consoles. So shout outs and kudos to Sony and Microsoft on that front. Let's just establish that. Point number 2. Let's just go into the actual performance. For years, probably for most of the last decade especially, the refrain, the complaint from the console, from the gamer community in general, has been, we need to kill 30 FPS. We need 60 FPS. Everything needs to be 60 FPS. Why won't Microsoft and Sony make 60 FPS the standard? All of that's been, right, the request, the refrain for definitely throughout the entire PS4 and Xbox One generation for sure, right? Well, guys, what has happened? Are you guys not paying attention? You guys are still complaining about 30. There's been so many articles about 30 hertz is not good enough for this gen and whatever. But do you realize that in this generation, since these consoles came out in November 2020, literally over 95% of all released games on those two boxes, and we're talking over 600 games to date, native releases, not backwards compatibility stuff, native releases, over 600 games, over 95% of them have run at 60 frames per second or higher. Over 95%. In fact, let's flip it. Let's make it easier for you guys. I challenge someone, please, let me know. Put it in the comments. I've already put this out there, by the way, on several forums. No one has given me an answer yet. I challenge someone to identify 10 games, 10 out of over 600 games released this generation that are limited to only 30 frames per second. I haven't heard an answer for that yet. I can give you guys a head start and name 5 right off the bat. Starfield, right? The Query is one of them. Microsoft Flight Sim, okay, is another one. Okay. Gotham Knights, right, is another one. Right. That's 4. That's 4 right there, right, to give you guys a head start. So give me another 6 if you can. Give me anyone, right? I think there are 1 or 2 more of games that I can't remember the names of right now. So, but 10, just give me 10. All right, I challenge somebody. I have yet to find somebody to do it. I have not been able to do it from my own searching and research. Okay, so it's conservative to say over 95 because if the number is really less than 10, guys, we're talking like, right? Frankly, we're talking like 99%. But most games, the vast majority of games this generation have run at 60 frames per second or higher, Okay, what are we complaining about? That's never happened in the history of console gaming. Even in the older, the older 16-bit era, right? And obviously the early 32-bit era, please, okay? And not only are these systems, mostly running games at 60, there are a consistent 60. We're talking a 99 percentile of 60 in the vast majority of cases. We're not seeing games with just, frame graphs that look like this and are completely unstable and, fluctuating all over the place. Yeah, sure, some games drop. But we usually are seeing games drop from 60 to like 57, maybe 55. And again, only in select places, right? This has been literally the best performing console generation we have seen. I'm putting it out there. I am saying it, okay? Tell me I'm wrong, okay? That's the numbers, I guarantee you. Right? Well over 95% or over 60. In addition to that, this generation, we've seen this advent of fidelity performance mode. So we've gotten additional flexibility that we haven't had. Some people Only care about, they'll run at 720p, 60 frames per second and be fine. Some people, want to see native 4K or, just higher resolutions in general. That's cool. That's great, right? So just looking at 2023 alone, right? Am I lying about look at the biggest games released you could think of in 2023. How many of them had a 60 hertz mode? How many were limited to 30? Okay. Do I need to go down the list? Forspoken, Dead Space Remake, RE4 Remake, Hogwarts, Jedi Survivor, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 16, Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake, Redfall, Lords of the Fallen, Hi-Fi Rush, Life of Pi, Immortals of Avium, Avatar. Dude, like all of them. Even the graphically, most advanced graphic, Alan Wake 2, Avatar, right? Cyberpunk, Phantom Liberty, right? The DLC. Those were Digital Foundry's 3 most, best graphics of the year. All 3 of them run at 60 frames per second on console. Even the big, full-on UE5 titles like Lord of the Fallen and Immortals of Avium. RoboCop, right, as well, UE5 title. All run at 60 frames per second. What are we complaining about here, guys? What do you want? You guys spent, like in the PS4 generation, we were limited to 30 across the board. And the number was probably flipped, right? I mean, like, literally, probably 3 out of 4 games, at least 75% or more games were limited to 30. Right, there was a number of games that were purported to have or target 60 that developers had publicly said they were trying to hit 60 and they could not do it. Kojima publicly said for Death Stranding initially on PS4 that the target was going to be 60, couldn't do it. Naughty Dog had mentioned that with Uncharted 4. They showed a trailer of Uncharted 4 running at 60, said that was the target. They couldn't do it. Drive Club, right, was supposed to be 60. Infamous Second Son was supposed to be 60. These were things that were out there in the last generation publicly. Could not do it, right? 60 was nowhere near the norm last gen. It was nowhere near the norm in the PS3, Xbox 360 era either. The biggest games we remember from that era, of course, was 30, right? Everything from Oblivion and Skyrim and MotorStorm and Killzone, right? And all of this stuff. I mean, come on, right? So, we gotta get it together. Okay, like seriously, right? Like this is as good as it can get, right? And we're still complaining. This is the thing about that. In addition to the 60 hertz, this is the first generation where we actually have 120 hertz. We have 120 FPS games, guys. In fact, not just a handful. This isn't just a one-off gimmick. There are over 100 games in this generation. 100 out of that, over 600 that actually have 120 hertz support. Now, what does support mean? It doesn't always mean that the game is running at absolute native 120 frames per second. It does mean, though, that the game is able to push past 60 and run somewhere between 60 to 120. It targets 120. Okay. Now, at those high frame rates, most people are not going to notice the difference. There's a lot of people are still playing games on TVs or monitors that only are limited to 60 anyway. Okay. But it's there. All right. And it's there in a number of titles. We also see unlocked frame rates being a much bigger thing, allowing games to go past 60 hertz. Now, in addition to that, VRR, variable refresh rates, VRR is a thing now, right? It really is a thing now. And TV support it, these consoles support it, HDMI 2.1 spec supports it, and we're seeing that in a number of games. Not as many as I would like, but a number of games. So what does that mean? That means that those unlocked frame rates, which is a thing that was kind of passe and taboo to do in console gaming because you always wanted as stable performance as possible. That's where the whole frame rate lock came from for 30 or 60. But now you can unlock the frame rate, especially if you have a higher number of frame rate. Unlock it, and VRR means that even when the frame rate is doing this, it stays in sync with the actual display. So your perception is that it still feels smooth, which is what you want. So doing that, yeah, that's where you can get a game that would have had just been locked on any other console generation, like Spider-Man, right, would have been locked at 30 or 60 or whatever they were doing. Now they can unlock that frame rate, and you see that you get more performance, right? Because when you lock the frame rate, it doesn't mean that the system can't do more. You lock it because you basically are trying to lock it at what is the quote-unquote minimum, right? The minimum bar, right? Because that's what you don't want to see dips from. If it's going higher than that, great. So you lock it at the minimum. So if you have a lock at 60, that usually means that the system is running at well above 60, most cases. And in the rare cases that it drops, it might drop to 60, but you want to keep it there, right? So what do you see? You see games like Spider-Man 2 that when it's unlocked, it runs at 60, but then when it's unlocked, it's running at somewhere between 80 to 100 frames per second. That's a lot of extra performance that you're now able to get, right? So it's a great thing to have that feature. We have that now. That is a performance improving thing, right? These are facts, guys. This is what it is. This is what we're dealing with here in terms of performance. So we got to again think about, what are we talking about when we say that these systems are underpowered from performance? What is the comparison point, right? Of course, it typically comes from, like I said, the PC. Okay, and the reality is, 3 years into this console generation, these consoles are still conservatively more powerful than over 75% of the PCs that gamers are actually gaming on. Because there are hundreds of configurations and SKUs of PCs that are active in terms of what gamers are playing on today. That is my biggest frustration. Because most of these complaints and most of the reference point to the PC always points to the PC like it's a single, super high-end, max-out box, right? The PC as a platform. Oh, this game should be on PC. It'll be better, blah, blah, blah. When they say that, they're immediately assuming a 4090 and a 16-core, right? 7900, Ryzen or Intel 14000K CPU. No. That is not what most people are gaming on, guys. That is not how the PC works. Okay, and I know that because I work with game developers that have to work and build games on PC all the time. It is a very hard thing because there's so many different configurations. Reality check, folks. Here's an example. I mentioned earlier, I have literally 7 PCs. I work in PC gaming, like I said. I have my own desktop, my own home desktop. I have multiple work machines, test machines. I have a work laptop. I have a game-focused laptop for testing. My wife has a Surface Book. She has a work laptop. I mean, literally 7 PCs. Out of those 7 PCs, they're all on the PC. They're all Windows. But out of those 7, my PS5 is more powerful than all but one of them. And I know that because I've gamed on them. So I know when I see the frame rates dipping and I feel the inconsistency of the performance, and I'm like, oh, this is running at a perfect smooth, at this same resolution in this medium or to high settings, it feels that much better on the PS5. All but one of them. I have a 4090 here. I have a Threadripper 24-core CPU system. I mean, I have all of that. Okay? But out of 7 PCs, my PS5 is more powerful than all but one. It's more powerful than 6 of them. That's the reality, guys. The real point of comparison here really should be about what the consoles delivered before. Compare consoles to other consoles. That's my point. That's where I think these machines shine. So, point number 3. So, point number 2 was the raw performance that went into all of that. That's the crux of this. Point number 3. Do I need to reiterate? We have real-time ray tracing in a $500 box in your living room as of 2020. Real-time ray tracing is a thing. Guys, and as recently as 2019, I was on forums, if you were talking to folks, and they tried to say that these consoles will have real-time ray tracing, right? And everybody was speculating about what the PS5 and next Xbox could be. If you were to say that they would have real-time ray tracing, people would literally laugh you out the forum, laugh you out the virtual room, laugh you out the real room. It was not even thought of. NVIDIA had just announced the Turing in 2018, their Turing architecture. That was the first real-time ray trace GPUs, right? That was the first of it. They had just announced that. So the idea that whatever AMD was cooking up, right, which was already well into development by this point, would actually be able to feature this at that price point, at the console price point, in addition to everything else it has, NVMe SSD and blah, blah, blah. No way. And ray tracing is not a gimmick. Okay, this isn't something that's just in a handful of titles. Okay, there are literally nearly 50 titles so far that have released with ray tracing features on the console. Just looking at 2023 alone, guys, like, am I making this up? Let's think back to some of the big releases in 2023 that actually had ray tracing. All right, Forspoken, ray tracing. Dead Space Remake, ray tracing. Hogwarts, ray tracing. Lords of the Fallen, right? UE5, ray tracing. Jedi Survivor, ray tracing. RE4 Remake, ray tracing. Spider-Man 2, of course, PS exclusive, ray tracing, ray trace reflection throughout the whole entire New York virtual world. Avatar, Talked about that. That has ray tracing. It even has ray tracing at 60 frames per second, by the way, in its performance mode on console. Immortals of Avium, 60 frames per second UE5 title, ray tracing, features ray tracing. This is just 2023. I mean, there's others, of course, you can dig in and go back before, but this is the thing. And we're going to see a lot more ray trace titles next year and beyond, for sure. Point number 4. Do I need to remind you guys? We now have the fastest load times in a console since before the PlayStation 1 in 1995. So we have the fastest load times in a console in roughly 30 years. Right? I mean, as of 2020, roughly 25 years, let's say. Like, real talk. Right? We're talking, load times in most cases under 5 seconds. Instant fast travel within 1 to 3 seconds maybe, right? In the best case, again, not every game utilizes this to great effect, because it depends on the game, depends on the developer, how they coded it, etc. These consoles shipped with NVMe high speed, ultra high speed SSDs in 2020 and a $500 box at a time where most NVMe's that were larger than 1 terabyte was almost that price itself. Right, a 2 terabyte NVMe in 2020 would have easily been about $400 to $500. Right, no question. Right, they put it into these boxes and still kept the price at $500 with the GPU that can handle ray tracing, with an 8-core Zen 2 CPU as well, with 16 gigabytes of fast RAM as well. I mean, guys, like, come on, right? Point number 5. What I love about this generation is I like to say everything is covered. So if you look back at previous generations, there always was a significant gap in the hardware design. There was always something that was lacking. Do you guys remember, the RSX versus the Cell in the PS3? The RSX was relatively weak, right? The PS2 GPU was, if you want to call it that, didn't have a lot of hardware support, didn't have anti-aliasing support. So the image quality on PS2 games was just horrendous. You guys remember the 6-axis PS3 controller, right? That thing that literally like 3 games supported. Okay, call it a gimmick at best, but it was there. Remember how the PS2 launched without internet support, only 2 controller ports in an era where there was so many other machines were already 4 controller ports and internet, support, et cetera. These kind of things, no HDMI. Remember when the 360 launched, right? You guys remember this stuff? This is what we used to see. And then later on in the console generation, they'll do a revision, add HDMI support, add analog sticks, right, on the controller, add, an adapter to get four controller ports, or add an adapter to add a modem to it, and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of what we're used to seeing. With these boxes, everything is covered. We've seen the best controllers, right, that Sony's ever have, the most feature complete, the most technically advanced controllers with haptics, adaptive triggers, speakers, lights, I mean, you name it, everything. Ergonomically as well is one of the best. We're also seeing the best audio delivery from any console generation, right? Absolute state-of-the-art, full 3D audio capability, Dolby Atmos support, for both boxes now. PS5 didn't have it at launch, but now it does. They still have their own Tempest 3D. The result was full binaural 3D audio capability. All right, and now Dolby Atmos support. That's awesome. Anyone that has a home theater, sound bar, headphones, you're getting the best sound that we ever got from console generation before. Superior image quality. We're seeing obviously 4K resolution, and even when games don't render at native 4K, today in 2023, we have the most advanced and the best upscaling and reconstruction techniques that really work and are used regularly on the PC as well. So it's not an issue of just power, right? PC gamers use it. Even high-end PC gamers use DLSS, FSR, that kind of stuff. We're obviously seeing at a console what it allows is better performance. Like I said, it's helping hit that 60 hertz target, helping make 60 the standard. In the meantime, we're still getting crisp, clean image quality. Again, who remembers the travesty that was the IQ on PS2 without anti-aliasing support? Who remembers the lack of color and murkiness of early PS3 games, for that matter, and early 360 games, right, for that matter? right? Go back and look, and we're gonna do that. I'm gonna help you guys do that. But go back and look at some of these old games. They looked horrible. I gotta love the balance of these consoles. How do I know these consoles are balanced? Because the games speak for themselves. You can't have 98% of your games hitting 60, which is the console target, by the way. That tells you everything you need to know about how balanced the console is, how effective and efficient the CPUs are, right? Because that's usually a CPU limited thing, which is what we saw in the PS4 era, which is why so many PS4 games were limited to 30, because those Jaguar CPUs were horribly weak. Balance, right? Those systems weren't balanced. They had a lot of memory. They had good GPUs. They had horrible CPUs, right? PS3 had a crazy powerful CPU. It had that split RAM that messed everything up for developers. It had, again, a relatively weak GPU. Okay. Remember the days of when you looked at a PC port to a console where you would just literally see entire parts of the level missing? Developers would have to go and redesign the level because they couldn't fit it in the limited memory on a console. So there always was a memory constraint, right? Remember the days of having a game like Battlefield where it was limited to 16 or 32 players online, but the PC version could do a full 64? Yeah, I remember that, right? You remember seeing console ports where the world was literally like cut down so much, the density was reduced and all of this stuff. We're not seeing that anymore. These console ports may run at a lower resolution and may be running at a lower frame rate, 60 versus 200 or something on the high-end PC, but everything is there. The games are the same. Everything is there. Even looking at stuff like the texture resolution, in most cases, are absolute on par, are there. You're not hearing stuff about, limited memory on console. Most PC games are still recommending 16 gigs, which is what the consoles have. Right? We're not seeing that. Battlefield, had 128 player support on both PC and console. Right? Call of Duty had the same number on both PC and console. I mean, everything is there. The core game is there. That wasn't always the case. You see a ton of cutbacks, right, on console back in the day. Right, so we gotta just really we gotta appreciate what we have, man. We're living in the days of just lots of just luxuries here and taking it for granted, and it's just ridiculous to me, right? It is not fair. Summary: we got the lowest failure rate probably in any console generation. I pointed out that we have the best performance, where 60 hertz is the norm, and we have a number of games, not an insignificant amount of games, approaching 120 hertz, and not just targeting 60, but delivering the 60 with a certain level of consistency that we're not used to seeing, especially on console. We're seeing the most enhancements across the board, where everything was addressed. Like I said, no stone unturned. Everything is covered. Controller, I/O, sound, right? Ethernet and Wi-Fi, build quality, everything, right, was addressed with these console generation, and all to great effect. Best controllers that we've had across the board, best audio, best sound, like I said, we've had fastest loading times that we've had in almost 30 years since pre-CD-ROM days, right? Most balanced consoles that we've had. Again, games speak for themselves in terms of the performance that they're delivering. It's all there. You have to ask yourself, and I'm asking the question, what more do you guys want? Answer me that question. That's it for now. But for part 2, come back, check me out. We're going to go back and look at some of the greatest games, some of the most memorable games that we've had on consoles over the past few decades. We're going to go back and look at them a little bit closer and just remember, let's see what they really looked like, what they really ran like, and how does that compare to what we're seeing today. I think you'll be pretty interested and excited about that. So come back and check that out. True Techno Gamer here, signing off for now. I want to see you in the comments. I'm looking. I can't wait. Let me know how you feel, what you think of what I'm saying, where you're coming from with this. Till next time, signing off.